Well, good morning, everybody. Here I am again, Tara with the Wifey Wake Up podcast. Reboot, restart for today. I hit the wrong recording button. So this is try number 2 for episode number 39, but this will be the official one. So hello, good morning, everybody. Yes, they're at least here in Central Time Zone. There's a few minutes left here of what do we have of the morning. And why are we getting started basically at the crack of noon today? Well, my husband took me out on a very nice coffee outing this morning, a coffee date. So that's why we're getting started late. Fortunately, I could push out my other work as well. And, it really messed up my day, but it was so worth it being able to have a coffee date with my hubby this morning. It's a beautiful morning. It's one of those mornings here in Minnesota where you can really feel that we're getting to the end of summer and fall is just beginning to start. It's so beautiful where there's just a cool breeze but you can still feel the warmth of the sun. And so it was absolutely worth moving around the schedule to have that morning date with him. So today we're talking about, this is for the guys, but I thought originally this would be for the guys, which I don't typically coach guys. And I don't think this is really coaching. It's more just kind of letting in the guys on maybe how a woman thinks, especially a woman who appreciates more of the traditional relationship. And so more so just kind of letting you in on what's going on in that woman brain. And boy, if we figure that out as women and can share it, first of all, know it for ourselves and share it, it is certainly a win-win situation. So guys and ladies, because you might be experiencing this and not knowing this, why I think guys should not be vulnerable, but should be open. And what is the difference? Now, if you enjoy this conversation, got some benefit out of it, please like and subscribe, share with a friend you think also may benefit. And also please comment. I think this one's going to drum up some comments and I'd love to hear from you. So what I mean specifically, I prepare for each podcast by writing about it. And this one ended up being like twice as long. Even though I try to keep it short, it ended up being about twice as long as I wanted. But I kind of wanted to shake it off because I was like, I don't coach guys, but this kept coming to me. So I think it needs to come out. And I'm really curious to hear what guys have to think. I'm going to definitely bring this up in John and Tara podcast when I do that next with my husband, because I'd like to hear the guys' feedback on this. So to start things out, this is really from my experience. All of Wifey School podcast and Wifey Wake Up is based in my 20 plus years of marriage with my husband. But this goes back to way back in the day when I was dating. And fortunately, I had a very short dating career. I say career because it's, dating time. And fortunately, because I didn't have to go through a lot of rigmarole, I found my husband pretty quickly. And I think that is certainly a blessing. But in that short time, I did have a couple of very serious relationships that were each over a year. And in each of those and in a few other relationships, I heard from these guys something of this directly. I don't deserve you. What was another one? I feel that you're too good for me. And something of the other ways of saying that. And even though I was really young, I was around 18, let's say 17, I just felt like as soon as they said that or something of the sort, I just felt like it was the kiss of death. I was like, don't say that. I didn't say it out loud, but I just felt something in my heart and in my gut, like, I think that's the beginning of the end. And in my mind, I couldn't do anything else but accept what they're saying as the truth, right? And years later, I feel that I can explain this more. I didn't know consciously at the time, although I knew consciously that the relationship was basically ending. But now, a couple decades later, I can explain more. Now, typically I like to use dictionary definitions. So when we're talking about vulnerable versus being open, but I think this is best explained by giving a few actual real life examples. And first we need to accept the premise. Well, it's going to make sense if you accept the premise that we are modern human beings, but basically we've been trained. We are, you could say, hardwired by thousands of years of survival instincts. And so this is where it's coming from. So take a dog, for example, and I think we all have enough experience with animals. You just kind of know, for example, when the dog is taking a position of submission. And if you're not familiar, which I think most people are, we intuitively know when a dog is submitting. And I forgot to bring up this screen ahead of time, so forgive me a moment. But you know when a dog is either like lying on its side or on its back, and it is submitting to another dog or maybe even a human. And in that position, what he's doing is he's exposing all of his most vulnerable locations on his body. And that means that he's putting his life most literally in another's hands or jaws. Now I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's the one I wanted to show. So a lot of you are probably familiar with this kind of position, right? So the dog here is exposing, its neck is rather exposed. It's certainly its soft underbelly is exposed and really easily can be harmed. And so that's a position of submission that we know visually, right? And so that is a position of being vulnerable, right? Now, let's see. It's different from a position where a dog might be just in a neutral position and it's standing on its feet. And again, I'm going to go back to this image because it's much easier to explain by position. Here are a couple of examples of a dog just like in a normal, neutral, relaxed position. Here's a German Shepherd, just showing a neutral position. It's okay. It could be ready to fight in an instant. It could be ready to play in an instant. It is in a neutral, relaxed state. Now, that would be a position that I would say in what I'm trying to define here between vulnerable versus open. That's a more open state. They're open technically to attack, but not so open that they're vulnerable literally on their back. That dog could still defend itself, but it's open to engage. It's open to play. Okay. So I want to give another example. So I want to just clearly define here what I mean by vulnerable versus open. Now, in a human example, we don't use this on a regular basis, but you've probably seen pictures of a person being knighted. So the king or queen is knighting someone. And I was going to bring up those photos, but just remove that screen. But you can bring a picture to mind, maybe from a movie. Maybe you've actually seen imagery of a Queen Elizabeth, for example, knighting someone, King Charles now. And part of the ceremony is they take a sword and they touch the sword to the shoulder, each shoulder of the person being knighted. Now, what that actually is, that position is an extreme position of submission. And the person is extremely vulnerable. They literally are giving the king or queen the upper hand, where assuming the sword is sharp, of course, that person could behead them in an instant. So it is a position and a symbol representation of respect, trust, and extreme submission. And similarly, back in the days when anyone who could have a sword, who could afford a sword, people would greet each other by curtsy and by bowing. And similarly, you might not bow to everybody because of hierarchy, and also it's a gesture of trust. Now, there are different levels of bowing by how deeply one bows and how much lower they bring their head and expose their neck. Again, it's not a modern day example, but we've all seen movies. We know the example. We've seen it at least, but may not know the symbology of it. And the greater the bow, the greater, when they remove their eyes in particular, they're exposing their neck. So what the heck does this have to do with me suggesting that guys not be vulnerable, but be open with women? hang on, I'll correlate the two here. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying that men should never be vulnerable with women, but they should only be vulnerable when they want to be taken care of. Because when you are showing your soft underbelly or you are submitting, again, I'm giving the visuals, right? You're totally submitting to the woman by being very vulnerable. Her instinct to nurture and to take care kicks into overdrive. And if you're looking vulnerable, her instinct is to take care of you. And that might be what you need in the moment. So maybe if you're sick, you actually do need someone to help you and take care of you. But that ends when you get better. But if you are continually showing that you are vulnerable to her, opening up your emotions in a way that you show that you feel insecure, it is going to trigger in her the feeling of insecurity, and that she has to amp up her game and take care of you and take care of the situation. Now, again, there are situations where that is necessary, right? In an emergency. My husband was very ill for a while, and I needed to step up my game. But if you want a traditional relationship where the man is the head of the household and making the decisions, taking on the responsibility, and the woman is in a nurturing role, if the man is continually being vulnerable, exposing his underbelly where he's very soft and can be injured, right? He's showing weakness, and he's showing weakness to himself first, and he's showing weakness to others. So this is also why, and it's important, women, that you do not put men down, well, ever, but especially in front of other people, because any man who knows this instinctively, that he can't be vulnerable, he can especially not be vulnerable in front of other people. And so I'm going to do a little bit of interpreting, going back to the memory of previous boyfriends saying to me, I feel like I don't deserve you. You're too good for me. And that sort of thing. It would be followed up by compliments, which is nice. But here's what I realized decades later, what that meant to my subconscious as a woman who wanted a relationship with more traditional roles. What I heard when the guys said this is not a compliment, you're too good for me, or I'm not good enough. What I think an ancient part of my DNA knew is that these guys were saying, I cannot provide what I think you deserve. And that implies are not capable of, not just cannot, fathom and so forth, but just they were submitting and on their backs going, I know that I don't have what it takes to do what I think that you deserve. Because it wasn't me saying, this is how I want to live. This is, how our life is going to be, that sort of thing. It was more just kind of an internal knowing, right? And I want to emphasize that these are things that we can intuit and we do know on a very deep level. And so looking back, how I interpret this in this situation was they were young men, and I was very fortunate to have very good relationships in my particularly dating relationships, did not have any disasters, which is very, very fortunate. I did not come to my marriage with baggage. But what I see in hindsight is that these guys were already submitting to the future man that they saw I could or might be with, and that they could not or would not put up a fight for me, and I'm not even talking about a fight of a threat, but but the true protecting, this is my family type of standing up. And again, for a woman who wanted more of a traditional relationship, a traditional structure, intuitively in me, and I don't think I knew that at the time. I want to emphasize that as well. These are all real intuitive types of feelings that in hindsight I can see, which is why I'm sharing these with you, because women in particular, you might have heard this. You might have experienced this. And maybe a guy has said to you, you're so wonderful. I don't even know if I deserve you. And I think society today would say that's a compliment, but it's not a compliment to you. It's actually the guy putting himself down. My husband has never said, I don't deserve you. You're better than me. That's just not the truth. The truth is he instead says compliments. I love you. You're wonderful in this way. He doesn't have to raise me up because he puts himself down or lowers himself down. Because what happens is, if you want to have a traditional relationship where the man is the leader of the home and the leader in all ways, is that he cannot be exposing his belly. He cannot be the one that is bending his knee and being knighted by you. You can revere him in that way. But if he is lowering himself, that's not the way a man, in my experience, should be lowering himself. Men and women submit themselves in servitude because they love. They don't submit themselves in being vulnerable and passivity, particularly the men, because that puts him in a weak position. Puts him in a weak position for himself, and it puts him in a weak position for you. Now, I can hear the grumblings, but again, I'm emphasizing those people who know or maybe have inklings that they want to have a more traditional relationship, and this helps to put things in proper order. It helps to prevent, because I could see, if a man is saying, you're too good for me, I don't deserve you, he doesn't have the wherewithal to fight for you because he already feels not deserving enough. So that fire is not strong enough to be your provider and protector. So I'm playing the role of interpreter here. Okay, I've seen a number of arguments happen between men and women, particularly online and about relationships, because there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how men think and interpret things through their own being, and how women interpret things. And I think this is one of those things that probably women don't even know is going on. So what could be happening is the man is saying, you're so wonderful, you're so amazing, what did I do to deserve you? And over time, they start separating. She's feeling less and less attracted because he's literally saying, I'm not good enough for you. And for a woman who intuitively wants a man who can provide and protect, she knows that he's not capable because he's not able to step up to the plate, not even putting himself in he's not even in the thought process of going, yes, this is my woman, this is my family, and this is mine in a very positive way. Just a moment. So I hope the illustrations explained things well, because again, I think this is one of the things that are misunderstood, because innately as men and women, we are not the other sex. And so we don't naturally think like the opposite sex, let alone if we even understand our own thoughts and our own thought process. So that's why I'm sharing this lesson from today. It's not only from marriage, it is also from dating experience. And I think could be very helpful for you if you find that you, particularly men, if you find that at a certain stage of a relationship, when you're becoming vulnerable, you find the woman kind of fading away. And women, if you tend to pick a certain kind of guy that is just enthralled with you and is just amazed with you, rather than being, he can be proud of you and just thrilled to be with you, but he feels like he deserves you. He feels like you're on par, and that he is able to be there with and for you. I really hope that came across as clearly as possible, and that, of course, making sure to understand that this is in the context of people who know or maybe are realizing that they want a more traditionally structured relationship where the man is the leader of the household. And what I want to emphasize, I'm glad I remembered this, what I want to emphasize are 2 points here. And I'm going to read this to make sure I got it right straight. If a man lowers himself in a vulnerable way in front of a woman, it causes him to be weak. It causes him to be weak because he's already admitting. Imagine the dog that is just being totally vulnerable and it's on its back. It is already initiating to itself it's being weak, and it initiates doubt and insecurity in her. Now I'm cross-referencing here, but if a man is showing his vulnerability, and the example that I mentioned was, "You're too good for me. I don't deserve you," or if he's in a prolonged state, he's not just sick with an illness, but maybe he has a series of hardships, and I'm putting hardships in air quotes here, that he continually needs rescuing from someone else. And particularly if you as the woman keep rescuing him, he is showing that he doesn't have enough confidence in himself, therefore has doubt and insecurity, and that triggers doubt and insecurity in her and moves her to her male side, which is to come in and rescue him. And it also initiates the caretaker role, but in more of a masculine way. Rather than a nurturing, it's more of the caretaker, prolonged caretaker role. So that's one thing. And I want to emphasize that not being vulnerable does not mean being closed off or guarded. Not being vulnerable is being that dog. Imagine the dog in that neutral state, right? He can play, he can defend. He's not in continual defense mode or guard or attack mode, but is very pliable. And so if another dog initiates play, he's ready for play, right? And that's being open. A good leader, and this is what I want to finalize with, is that this is about the man being the leader of the household and of the family. And a good leader is able to communicate anything. They can communicate anything when it's necessary, and without showing insecurity, weakness, but to say, even this is what I think, this is what I feel about the situation, and this is where we're going. And being able to draw the lines as well. So there's a little bit more that I wrote, if you're wondering, below. But again, this is not necessarily coaching for guys. This is insight into the female brain, and especially actually both versions. A woman maybe who is accustomed to growing up in a family where maybe it's a single parent family with the mom, who that's all she's seen is the woman coming in and taking care of business, and not having the man perhaps that can communicate in a leadership kind of way. Maybe grew up in an environment where the mom was the caretaker and always coming in and rescuing. And so that's all that she or he knows, the man coming into the situation as well. It's important for both to be able to identify, is the man being properly vulnerable, like he is in a state where he truly can't take care of himself, like he's just very ill for a few days, or for maybe is deathly ill at a certain time. And what does it look like for a man to be constructively open? Again, it's also is being able to talk about basically any topic without being overly guarded or overly vulnerable, and also be able to lead the family at the same time. So obviously this is going to change when you're dating or when you're married. I gave the examples of when I was dating and men said, "I don't feel like I deserve you," or "You're too good for me," and what that triggered in me. And hopefully you figure that out by the time you've tied the knot. So that's the point of this podcast as well. Learning these things, you can learn about marriage and relationships before you get into the long-term committed and, of course, married relationship. I would love to hear your thoughts and especially your experiences about this. Was there any big ahas for you, guys or ladies, in oh, okay, I think that's what happened there? Because there's been so much in our society in the last several years with Brene Brown coming out. It's like the word vulnerability just got reintroduced to the zeitgeist as a word. And I think it has its place, but like anything, you need to know when and how to use it. So would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. And I'm certainly going to bring this up in the John and Tara podcast with John, because I'd like to hear his thoughts on this. And he'll, of course, enjoy any opportunity to talk about my exes and where they made errors. So, okay. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.